These are real 911 calls, disturbing, mysterious, and true. Each story will send chills down your spine and slowly drift you into sleep. This story is completely free. We don't put any ads, which means we don't earn anything from these videos. All we ask is one small favor. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. It's free for you, but it gives us the motivation to keep making more real police stories every night. Also, tell us in the comments which city are you watching from and what time is it right now. We love reading your messages. Now, let's begin the story. Story number 1. I was a deputy in a rural county in the Midwest. The kind of place where you can drive 15 minutes and only pass one set of headlights. Landline towers dot the fields. The old folks still use wall phones with spiral cords. If you grew up here, you learn the landscape not by landmarks but by the way the wind sounds in the corn and the distance between mailboxes. It was late fall, about 2:30 inches the morning, and I was rolling through my usual circuit when dispatch cracked on the radio. Unit 2. 12, open line 911. No voice contact. Registered to 1842 County Road 9. Repeat calls from that address in the last week. Are you able to check? 2. 12 copies, I said. En route. I marked it. Code 2. No lights, no siren. You don't wake a county up for a hang-up, but repeat calls from the same place at that hour, those you don't ignore. The CAD notes popped on my in-car terminal while I took the left turn at the co-op. 3 calls over the last 10 days, all open lines, background faint and inconsistent. The number non-callable. Landline reports as in service, the note said. No answer on callback. A small flag from a property records clerk. Owner of record, Harold L. Greeley. Deceased, estate in probate. House should be vacant. I slowed. Vacant addresses don't call 911. I know that road like muscle memory. It runs out past the grain silos and then dips behind a tree line where the pavement isn't so good anymore. The night was clear, but cold. Frost was already gritting along the grass shoulders. My headlights touched the bare trees and threw back spindly shadows that skittered away as I moved. I radioed my approach. 212, on County Road 9. 5 out. Copy, dispatch said. Be advised, we just received an additional open line, same address. Patch available if you want ears. Stand by, I said, leaning into the steering wheel a touch. The road crested, and the Greeley place came into view. The Greeley farmhouse was 2 stories, white paint gone gray, porch sagging just enough to make you think twice about a quick step. No lights, no vehicles, the yard, a rectangle of frost-lit grass. The place had a reputation for just being old, not haunted or anything. Mr. Greeley had been a quiet man. He'd passed away that spring. We'd done a welfare check on him once a couple years before. He'd complained he didn't like how the summer storms made the telephone ring on its own. That stuck in my head as I pulled into the short gravel drive and killed my engine. 2. 12's on scene, I said. Dispatch, go ahead and patch the line to my radio. I'll do an outside sweep. Copy. Patching now. A low hum took over my primary channel, then a faint layer of sound. Open line calls always have a texture to them, the static of cheap wires, the almost hum of electricity breathing through copper. This one had those things, but under it, something else I couldn't name. It wasn't a voice or a footstep. The closest thing I can say is it sounded like the room itself was holding its breath too long. I stepped out, and my boots popped the frost. That sound traveled farther than you'd expect. I lit up the front porch with my flashlight, scanned each window. The front door was closed. A screen door hung crooked over it like an eyelid. No footprints in the frost on the porch steps, no recent tire tracks besides mine. I felt that first small pinch of wrongness you learn to trust. The kind that makes you slow everything down. Dispatch, I whispered without thinking about it. I'm going to knock. You're clear, they said. And then in the background, barely, there, the open line rustled like someone adjusting a phone against a shoulder. It made the hair on my arm stand up beneath the jacket. I knocked. The sound went into the house and came back flat as slate. I waited, listening to the radio hum. Knocked again. Sheriff's office. Anyone inside? I called. My voice felt too loud. Silence. Then something the radio hum shifted. It happened right as I lowered my fist. 3 muffled taps came through my speaker, slow and measured, like my knock replayed on a delay. I held my breath. The porch boards ticked as if settling. No wind to blame, no traffic. I just got 3 knocks on the open line, dispatch said, audible concern flattening her tone. I heard, I said. I'm going around to the side. I moved along the siding, scanning with the light into rooms with lace curtains stiff with dust. In the side yard, a telephone junction box clung to the house with a crooked rusted screw. The line ran from there up to a pole that divided the property from a fallow plot. The cable looked intact, no fresh work. I can recognize a cut or a splice at night about as well as I can recognize my own handwriting. It didn't look touched, but the box itself, when I brushed a finger against it, it was warm on a cold night. I kept moving. The back door had a storm door with cloudy plastic, the sort that deforms light. My flashlight made my reflection flare into a ghost, then settle. I jiggled the handle. Locked. Through the plastic, I could see through to a kitchen I remembered from a welfare check, clean, old, everything with a place. The wall phone had been mounted next to the fridge back then, with a long braided cord. I aimed my light. It was still there. The receiver was in the cradle. A slip of paper was tacked to the wall beneath it. From outside, I couldn't read it. Dispatch, any record of a key holder? I asked. Negative. No key holder listed, she said. I still have the open line. Nothing but that low noise. Can you try to call it? I asked. Again? Copy. A moment later, I heard, through my radio, the sound of a call being placed from the center. It's clean and clinical. That sound like tapping a glass followed by standard rings. But what poured into my radio wasn't outside. It rang in my ear like it was 2 feet from my face. 1 ring, 2, 3, and on the third, something else bled in a second ring chasing the first, not perfectly in sync, the way you hear yourself on a conference call delayed by a half second. It rang 13 times like that, overlapping in a way that made my pulse stumble to match it. Then it went back to that held breath silence. I stepped off the back stoop and shined my light up again at the line. The frost glowed on it. My breath looked like someone else's in the cone of the flashlight. I told myself I was being dramatic. I'd been up since 4 in the afternoon, and the body plays tricks. I'm going to contact a neighbor, I said. The closest was a quarter-mile down the road, an older woman named Mrs. Stillman who watched the world through her kitchen window like a weather vane. When I tapped her door, the house was dark except for a nightlight. I didn't make her come to the porch. I tilted my hat brim and kept my voice low. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We've had some calls from Mr. Greeley's number. Did the family take anything from the house? Anyone have access? Her face in the doorway looked pale in the blue nightlight. I haven't seen a car there since June, she said. Harold's nephew came once to gather mail. They shut his power off, didn't they? That's my understanding, I said. She shook her head. I do hear that phone ring some nights. Makes me want to answer it, but I just pretend it's the radio. She meant the AM radio. She kept tuned so low. It sounded like crickets. Is everything all right? Yes, ma'am, I said. Thank you. Lock up and go on back to bed. Back at the farmhouse, my breath fogged the same way in the same place, as though I was stepping into a loop. I stood on the porch for a long minute. I'll be honest, every instinct said to wait for a second unit, wait for a supervisor, wait for daylight, wait for anything that would spread the air out a little thinner. But it's my job to check welfare, and I had a legal basis. Repeated hang-ups, registered to a residence, reasonable concern someone might need help. I keyed the radio. 2. 12. Forced entry. Welfare check. Copy. Log notes made, dispatch said. You've got backup 5 minutes out. 10:04. I pried the screen door off with a pry bar and put a shoulder into the lock. It gave with a meager splinter. The smell that came out was the smell of an unheated house. Cold dust, old wood, the faint echo of cooking oil. Nothing sour or wrong. Just still. I stepped in and reset my breathing down. Sheriff's office, I called, steadier than I felt. If anyone can hear me, say something. From my radio, brushed with static, came the sound of my own voice, tinny, a half-second behind. Sheriff's office. If anyone can hear me, say something. That froze me more cleanly than any shout or slam would have. It was too exact to be coincidence. Dispatch came in immediately. 212, we're hearing your audio on the open line. Patching confirms duplicate. The caller audio is mirroring your radio feed with delay. I'm inside, I said. Ground floor, living room, nothing obvious. I swallowed. I'm going to the kitchen. It was a 2-room track, living room to kitchen to back hallway. My flashlight tacked across framed photographs. One of a man with a dog, I remembered Harold and Murphy. Calendars from a feed store 3 years out of date. A clock on the mantle that wasn't running, hands at 2:15. In the kitchen, the wall phone was there, cream-colored plastic. The receiver sat neatly in the tom, cradle. The line ran from it into the wall. I touched the cord. It was room temperature. The slip of paper pinned below it was a list of numbers written in careful pen. Doctor, neighbor, church. At the top, Harold's own number, in large hand, as if he kept meaning to dial it for practice. I lifted the receiver. No dial tone. No nothing. Just the weight of it. With the receiver pinned between shoulder and ear, I heard my boots shift on the linoleum through the open line in my radio. I put the receiver back in its cradle, and it clicked against the plastic, and across the knit of radio static, I heard the same click echo a heartbeat later. Something moved the air near me. No draft, no window open. It felt like a hush walking past. My backup's headlights washed through the front windows then, and the relief rolled over me in a quiet wave. I stepped onto the back stoop and waved them around. Deputy Klein rounded to me, bright-eyed, breath-puffing white. "You hear the double ring?" he whispered. I nodded and led him inside. We did a systematic check, room by room. It's amazing how much fear falls away when there's another human shoulder parallel to yours. It's like crossing a creek. You stop looking at the water and just look at your boot. Bedroom. Empty, bed made tight, blinds down. Bathroom. Clean. Toothpaste cap on. Mirror. Lined with a strip of reflectors. Hall closet. Coats. The kind old men wear to mowed lawns and funerals. Nothing out of place. But in every room, the mantel clock's time repeated. 2:15. The digital display on the stove had been blank. The microwave's clock pulsed 12, the way it will when you plug it in. The only timekeeper that meant anything was my watch, and it grudgingly ticked toward 2:49. We ended up in the living room where the base of the wall phone line disappeared into the floorboards. I traced it with my light to the basement step. The basement door stuck before it opened, wood swollen by seasonal air. Klein looked at me. I looked back. "You want to?" he said. "We should," I said. We went down slow, light angled ahead. The basement was what you expect. Jars, a workbench, the whiff of damp concrete. The line descended along the wall and terminated at a junction that looked older than we were. The coil wound through a porcelain insulator, then up and out toward the junction box at the exterior. And just like outside, the metal of the box here had a whisper of warmth. Not hot, not even warm, but not cold either. "Dispatch," I said finally, more to fill the space than to request anything. "What's the phone company on this? Do we have contact?" "Stand by," she said. Silence hummed. The open line in my speaker made a sound like someone clearing their throat very far away. Then, "Phone company reports the line was removed from the grid when the account was closed. There's no active service to that number." "Can they be mistaken?" Klein asked me quietly. "They can be anything they say on paper," I said. "But a ring is a ring." We stood there listening for a minute longer. And then I told Klein to close the basement door. We posted property notice on the doorframe we'd had to shoulder, and called the estate attorney listed in the file to let them know. We stepped back into the cold together. The stars had cut through the high clouds, and the night felt rounder, somehow not so flat. As we walked to the cars, Dispatch patched us again. "Just for your information," she said. As soon as you exited, the open line went silent. Then, for 30 seconds, it sounded like footsteps on creaky wood. Then the line terminated. No further calls since. I didn't say anything to that. Out on the road, I parked under a streetlight and typed the report with my gloved fingers. I didn't want the details to get fuzzy later. I wrote what I heard my voice echoed back to me, a line that should have been dead that acted alive. I kept it clean, no speculation. You learn that early. There's what you saw, what you heard, and what someone else will read after you're gone. The next afternoon, I came off shift and called the phone company rep back because it sat wrong. He pulled the account again and said, gently, as if I were the one confused, "Deputy, the drop to that property was physically disconnected at the pole in July." He sent a tech to check. The tech climbed up and took pictures. There it was, the loop coiled and taped. No service to the premise. And yet, for 3 nights, dispatch logged open lines from that number starting at around 2 in the morning. On the 4th night, it stopped. The estate sold the place to a young couple in spring when the snow went away. They painted it. They put a swing on the porch. I drove by and waved and didn't tell them anything but to call us if they needed anything. What stayed with me wasn't the ring or the echo. It was the feeling that I had walked into a call that the house had made for itself. Not a haunting. Nothing that dramatic. Just a structure with routines baked into the wood kettle on at 9, news at 6, lights out at 10. When an emergency burned itself into that rhythm heralds last spring, the quiet that followed the house might have learned to call without needing copper. We exist for that call, in whatever way it arrives. We show up, we check, we leave. Some nights, the job asks you to accept that not every call wants an answer. Some only want to be heard. Story number 2. I'm a response constable in a northern UK city. Been doing nights long enough to know what rain looks like under every kind of streetlight. If you've worked the graveyard shift here, you know the way the streets hush after the last bus, how shutters go down, and the glow on the canal turns from gold to a kind of iron. That night, it had been regular stuff domestics that de-escalated, a noise complaint, a suspicious van that turned out to be a delivery driver napping between drops. Nothing dramatic, just the pulse of a quiet shift. Control came over the airwave at 02:11. Priority intruder alarm. Cavendish Baths Museum. City Center. Multiple internal activations. Key holder en route. 20 minutes. Any unit free to attend? I keyed up. Papa 4-2, show us making. 2 up. My partner that night was Keely. Solid, calm. We both prefer buildings to people at 3 a.m. Buildings don't shout. A little context. Cavendish Baths used to be exactly what it sounds like. A Victorian Turkish bathhouse with marble steps and a glass roof, turned into a museum years ago. The alarm company sits in a monitoring center somewhere down south with screens and coffee. When a sensor trips in certain patterns, they ring our control, and it spits out a CAD. Not every activation means a prowler. Wind, pigeons, old wiring half our life is polite apologizing to key holders. But when you get a string of internal sensors tick off in a line, that's a bit different. That reads like footsteps. We cut from the ring road into the older part of the city where the buildings huddle close. The museum sits on a corner opposite a closed cafe and a barber with the pole still lit. As we rolled up, rain varnished the cobbles. Streetlights made the water on the big arched windows look like the glass was crying. Keely killed the engine, and the building immediately sounded larger. There's a noise to certain places, like the architecture itself is breathing old pipework shifting, the faint pop of central heating, distant snare drum drip of water in drains. Control, I said. Papa 4-2 on scene at Cavendish. No sign of forced entry at the front. We'll do a perimeter. Copy, Papa 4-2. For info, zones trip sequentially. Gallery 2, West Corridor, Reading Room. Now quiet for 2 minutes. Keyholder is a Mr. Hargreaves, ETA 15. We walked the perimeter under the hood of our caps, torches on low to not broadcast we were blundering around. The side gates were shut with a chain and padlock, dry and stiff with age. The back had a service yard with bins and a roll-up door lowered and locked. A small light glowed over the staff entrance, no movement inside. If anyone was in there, they'd not forced their way in. Probably heat plumes catching the PIRs, Keely murmured. You know how these old places hold temperature? I nodded. But I kept thinking about the way Control had said, sequentially. You get to know how the alarm company reads the maps. If they list zones like that, the activations were walking. Mr. Hargreaves arrived in a wool coat over pajamas, one of those long faces that look more awake at night. He rattled a bunch of keys big enough to open a castle. Evening, sorry morning, he said, breath fogging. Been months since a real one here. We do get the odd blip. Stupid pigeons. The glass roof, you know. It cools. It pops. But we had the glaziers last week. We stepped into the entrance hall as he keyed us in. The alarm panel did the thing I always hear in my sleep. High, shrill beeping, impatient and moral at the same time. He put in his code, and it went to a steady tick. The air inside had a particular smell I can't explain, like old books and clean tiles and something faintly metallic. Our footsteps sounded wrong on the tile, in a way you only hear in public buildings at night. The sound goes up and up, instead of away. Where were the trips? I asked. He fished a laminated plan from a drawer behind the front desk. The zones were marked in little rectangles with codes. He traced a finger. Here. The Georgian. Gallery. Then here. Then here. It's like someone departing for the night, to be fair. The way we used to close when we had the funds to staff it. Past the reading room, up the stair, check the west corridor, all the way to the staff door. Everything locked when you came down? I asked. Legally, I'm asleep and locked until 7. I live round the corner. I don't mind. Museum's a second home, you know. We did what we always do. Quiet, systematic, steady. Control stayed on the channel. Voice a meter behind my ear. Papa 4-2, for info. Alarm company reports further tripping stair C. Then an access door into gallery 3. The signal is clean. They can hear movement. Copy, I said. We're heading that way. I'll come with you, Hargreaves said. Don't worry. I won't rush ahead. He kept one hand in a pocket, the other on a little torch, with a beam like a cigarette. We pulled our own torches to medium. The big spaces breathing through seemed to stabilize with the light. We crossed the main hall where the plunge pool sat, tiled and bone dry, turned gallery with information boards and an old wooden bench. At night, even exhibits that are cheerful in the day feel like they'd prefer to be left alone. The echo returned the little scuff of my boot like someone walking uncomfortably close behind. At the foot of stair C, the steel fire door had one of those push bars with a green, luminous man running on the sign. We put ears to metal, listened. Somewhere deep in the building, you could hear a faint, persistent tone, the kind of sound you only notice when it stops. The emergency lighting put out a flat, even wash. Keeley pushed the door, and the stairwell opened up, concrete and painted iron, cold enough to pinch your skin. It's a Victorian building, but it was renovated in the 70s, and some corners look like leftover car parks. We climbed, Hargreaves behind us, his keys whispering against his coat pocket. The stairs smelled of lemon cleaner, and something damp that lives in the pores of old walls. At the first landing, there was a push to open toward the gallery spaces. We paused, listened. From the other side, I thought I could hear a voice. Not neck hair stuff, not whispering, not a person per se. A voice like you hear at a train platform, recorded, calm, issuing a polite instruction. It came and went, too soft to catch words. Did you hear that? Keeley asked. Yeah, I said. What do you run on the Tannoy at night? Nothing, Hargreaves said. It's off. The scheduler's set for day hours only. But his forehead was creased like he'd doubt his own settings. We pushed through. Georgian gallery in the day is light and polite portraits. A glass case with silver spoons. 2 long case clocks standing like sentries. By night, it was a series of islands in the torch beam. There was a hush on the room that had weight. I don't know how else to say that. I've been in a lot of empty places at stupid o'clock, and sometimes the silence leans on you. Keeley drifted left. I took the right. The alarm panel for this zone was winking softly, logging to itself. One of the long case clock's oak, brass face had its pendulum stilled. On the brass were the marks where lots of hands had polished the edges. The dial read 22 minutes to 9. There was no tick. Control, Papa, 4-2, I said. In Georgian. No sign of entry. Can we get a live update? What's your last zone hit? Static for a second, then control. Last hit 3 minutes ago. Reading room. Nothing since. Alarm company says the pattern was Gallery 2, West Corridor, Reading Room, Stair C, Gallery 3. They're getting motion in the corridor again now. West Corridor, Zone 5. Hargreaves leaned over his laminated plan. That's the route you'd take to close from east to west. It's almost... I don't know. It's almost training. Let's go, I said. We moved along, lights low. The west corridor had display cases along one wall and a bank of windows on the other. The glass showed a shadowed reflection of us moving, twice removed. Halfway down, a ceiling speaker popped quietly, the way a speaker does when it catches power or loses it. A woman's recorded voice, calm and precise, flowed into the corridor at a gentle volume. Ladies and gentlemen, the museum will be closing in 5 minutes. Please make your way toward the main hall. We look forward to welcoming you again. Hargreaves froze. No, he said softly, more to himself than to us. No, that's not possible. That's on a timer for 5:30. It's off in the software. It shouldn't. We stopped, listening to the rest of the sentence die into the carpet. On our radios, control was quiet, which is not normal. If you've got a good control room operator, their silence means they're letting the scene breathe. Could it be a residual message? Keeley asked Hargreaves. Like a backup? There isn't one, he said. I mean, I don't think there is. Control nudged us then. Alarm companies picked up reading room again. It's walking. If you're comfortable, we'll keep you updated with zones. Copy, I said. We're heading that way. The reading room had glass doors and long, old tables. Even our torchlight felt intrusive in there. The smell of paper and beeswax was stronger, and the air had a coolness that started at your ankles. Someone had left a mug on a lower shelf, wring-dried and perfect on the coaster. No draft, no creak, no intruder. There was, though, a series of very soft taps, 3 in a row, coming from somewhere up high. We all looked up at once without meaning to. The glass roof over the central hall is domed, a good 30 feet overhead, crisscrossed with the black bones of the frame. Rain ticked it, but the taps didn't sync with the rain. 3, silence, 3, the kind of sound you notice when you've been too still in too quiet a place. It sounded like someone in the building using the handle of a broom to reach a light switch they couldn't get to, gently missing. Control, Keeley said, voice neutral. Can you ask the alarm company whether any sensors are ceiling mounted? They say negative. Control came back. All wall PIRs, door contacts, and 2 pressure mats at the entrances. For info, storage prep area just ticked. That's internal. Staff only. That's at the back by the service door, Hargreaves offered. He sounded torn between being embarrassed and protective. We rarely open it. The pressure change there will make the alarms ping if you're sloppy with the door. But we're shut. We've been shut for hours. We crossed to the service corridor. If the main rooms are grand, the back corridors are tunnels. Linoleum, pinboard notices yellowed at the corners, stacked chairs under dust covers. Our torches picked out handwritten instructions. Switch UV on for Gallery X only when case is closed. Do not run dehumidifiers and radiators in the same room. We passed a staff loo, with the door propped open by a mop. Bucket. The handle moved a millimeter on a breath of air I couldn't account for. The door to the storage prep area had a keypad. Hargreaves tapped in a code, and the lock chirped. If you've never been in one, museum prep rooms look like both a workshop and a surgeon's theater. Clean tables, padded crates, racks of equipment. A little red phone sat on the wall, the sort you lift to get the monitoring center. It was inert. Under our torch beams, nothing in the room shifted, but the air had a drawn quality, like someone had just left and forgotten to take their presence with them. Control, I said, softer. We're in storage. No one visible. Any zones live? Affirmative, Control said. Stair C again. And the alarm company says they can sense weight on the pressure mat by the main exit. Not enough to trigger an alarm by itself, but call taker description says it's fluctuating. Weight on the mat with the door shut? Keeley asked. Affirmative. A recorded voice, male this time, older, warm, without electricity to it, came from somewhere not far away. Last visitors out. Lights down. It wasn't a sentence so much as a routine spoken into an empty space out of habit. It ran up my spine anyway. Hargreaves stared at a spot just above one of the tables like he might meet someone's eyes there. That is a phrase. he said. From Mr. Pollock. He worked the clothes for 30 years before we converted. He used to say it. Not over the tannoy. Just to himself. He passed in 2009. I can hear your skepticism from here. I know what it sounds like written down. You're picturing a tape or a prank played with someone's voice, grabbed off an old VHS. Believe me, I considered it all while my little torch circle moved over clamps and cotton gloves. But there was no kit turned on that would play that audio. It didn't have the speaker tone to it. It sounded like sound the room itself was making out of memory. We went up the stair again with that impression walking behind us. The building seemed to be guiding. When we were in the west corridor, the panel logged the reading room. When we were in the reading room, it ticked the storage. When we stepped into storage, it flickered stair C. It felt like we were following, but also being led into and out of its own familiar pattern. On the landing above, there's a small mechanical room. Nobody, visitors-wise, has any reason to be there. A green light leaked under the door like a slim bit of fresh water through rock. I pushed it, and the light bounced off. Metal ducts, paint tins, ladders. The hum was louder in here. The building's heart. A maintenance panel with a little LCD squinted at us. For a second, and I know this is just a thing my tired brain did, the numbers on the LCD looked like a time 10:55 before it reverted to something of no use to me. An empty plastic bottle made a soft clack-clack against a shelf every time a draught I couldn't feel elsewhere breathed through. Control, I said. We're going to secure the roof access and then work back. We're not seeing any signs of intrusion. Understood, Control said. For your SWAT, the alarm company confirms the main door's pressure mat returned to baseline when you entered storage. It is as if it's pacing your circuit. That's exactly what it feels like, I said before I thought better of it. We took the small flight up to the roof door. It had one of those chains across it that says in all caps, authorized personnel only, which in this job you learn really means you will be the authorized person eventually. The chain was in place. No fresh marks on the dust where you'd expect contact if it was moved. I put my ear to the steel again and heard the city, softened. The rain came gentler on the glass. Behind us, the emergency light hummed like an insect trapped in a jar. We came down and did the second half of our circle. It's almost laughably mundane to write it out now under the stairs. The environmental controls cupboard, a quick peek back into the main hall. The pool sat like a piece of night, the blue tiles dull as stone in our beams. Then, as if politely correcting us on a misstep, one of the long case clocks began to tick. No chime, just the slow, proper tock-tick-tock of a pendulum waking. Hargreaves closed his eyes for a second like he'd been given a kindness. We never wind that one anymore, he said. Funding. They all stopped the year we laid off watches. They'll tick on a slope sometimes if the floor. He didn't finish. None of us moved. The tick continued for maybe 20 seconds. Then it smiled itself out, and the room swallowed it. That was the moment for me. Not the voice, not the tannoy message at the wrong hour. That little gear waking and then deciding it didn't need to. I felt calm, not frightened. If anything, it felt like walking in on someone closing up and being stood politely aside of. We are trained to clear routes, to look for corners where someone could wait, for scuffs and scapes and the smell of a recently opened door. All that was just as important here. But what I felt was that if there was a someone, it was the building. It wanted to walk its route, the route a caretaker walks to say, all right, you lot, out you go, even if there's no lot left. We rearmed the system. Hargreaves did it slowly, like he didn't want to offend something. No obvious point of entry, he said. Writing in a book with carbon paper behind the page. Spoke to officers. Internal activations. No damage. No person found. Investigate sensors in daylight. He ripped off our copy and handed it to me. Do you think I'm daft? He asked, not quite smiling. I think sometimes buildings remember, I said, and regretted it immediately for sounding like a bloke telling ghost stories by the kettle. We'll put in the report for maintenance to check. If it kicks off again before dawn, ring us. We'll come back. That's the job. Back in the car, the heater breath made a faint cloud when it hit our wet jackets. We let our shoulders drop. Control came back. Just to close it off. Papa, 4-2. The alarm company says As you left the front, zones pinged in reverse. Back to the start point. 1 activation per minute. Final log. Main hall exit. Then nothing. We drove 1 slow loop round the building once more, then cleared. The rest of the shift passed, without drama. I wrote the report the way you're meant to write reports. Attended premises at request of Alarm Monitoring Center. No sign of forced entry. Internal sensors activated sequentially without visible cause. All doors secure. Keyholder present. System restored. No opinion, no poetry. If you put your feelings in, they won't print it. The next day, off duty, I got a short email through a generic address. Thanks for your attendance. Our engineer attended Cavendish. Found no faults. Noted environmental triggers within normal range. We'll keep an eye. 2 weeks later, on a different shift, the same building popped. Another crew went. Same story. The tannoy spoke once without power. The zones walked. One of the lads from that car told me it felt like the close of a day none of us were there to see. After the new year, the museum replaced the sensors. The calls stopped. The building still stands. If I go past on a sunny afternoon now, footfall and chatter make the place look like what it is. A good, well-kept museum with volunteers who care. And if I have to attend another alarm there on some late November night, I'll go, and I'll search, and I'll listen, and I won't expect anything other than another empty building with the warmth of old visitors still in the plaster. What stayed for me was how tidy it all was. No menace, no teeth on the back of the neck. Just a place that used to close its doors in a certain way at the end of the day, when a man in brown trousers and a cardigan would say, "Last visitors out," and the rooms would empty, and a clock would either keep ticking or stop. A routine so kind and ordinary that the building itself ran it even when there was no one left to show out. We came because an alarm said someone might need us. Maybe, that night, all that needed doing was to stand in the dark politely while a voice you couldn't record told an empty museum it was time to rest. Story number 3. I'm a patrol officer with a prefectural police department in the Kanto region. Night shift. Mostly out of a small koban tucked beside a convenience store and a bus stop that never sees a bus after midnight. If you've ever worked a koban at night, you know the rhythm last train lets off. A few bicycles whisper past, the vending machines hum like they're thinking, and then the city holds its breath and waits for the next small thing to go wrong. It was late winter, just before 3 in the morning. The air had that hard, clean cold that makes your nose sting. Light snow had sugar-coated the parked scooters and flattened the sound of tires on the ring road. I was finishing up a welfare check when the radio clicked, and dispatch put me on a line with a tone that wakes you up no matter how your body feels. "Unit Hachi-san," she said. "We're getting repeated open line 110 calls from an elevator emergency phone at Hikari Danchi, Block 12. No voice contact. Faint tone, and mechanical chime audible. Keyholder is on the way. ETA 15. Are you available?" Hikari Danchi is one of those post-war complexes, several blocks, each one a long concrete rectangle with external corridors like stacked railroad tracks. There's a small park in the center, a vending corner, a community notice board that still has New Year flyers curling at the edges. Block 12 is on the western edge, facing the river. I'd been there enough for noise complaints and a lost cat report that turned out to be a neighbor's scarf on a fence. "Hachi-san, en route," I said. I swung around the station square and took the 2-minute drive over. While I was rolling, dispatch kept me looped with the call. "Caller line still open," she said, voice steady. "We can hear the elevator chime. Sounds like a door ding. No speech. The number traces to elevator car 2, block 12. Copy. Any maintenance on scene?" I asked. "Elevator company reports no scheduled service. They're dispatching a tech, ETA 30 to 40, she said. "Keyholder, the building's caretaker confirmed he's home and coming down with keys." I pulled into the Danchi lot and cut the engine. Snow made the sodium light go golden. The building stood tall and quiet. Each external corridor, a rectangle of gray with a few warm windows along it like lit nodes on a board. The elevator columns are separate from the stairwells in this complex glass and steel towers grafted onto the ends. In the cold, the glass had fogged into sleepy squares, As I got out, I could hear a distant chime, regular, like a heartbeat heard through a wall. "Dispatch," I said, stepping under the awning. "I can hear a ding roughly every 30 seconds from outside. I'm at Block 12, elevator tower." "Noted," she said. "Open line call now at 8 minutes. No voice. We're maintaining." The front glass doors were closed, but not locked. This isn't a secured building beyond late-night intercom. The entryway had the usual display, a corkboard with lost items, a laminated fire escape plan, a little table with hand sanitizer, and a stack of community newsletters. My shoes squeaked out the cold on tile. To my right, the elevator call button sat on a stainless panel, glowing softly. Car 1 showed 1 farad. Car 2 was showing nothing. Above Car 2, the small speaker made the soft, not quite musical chime again. Ding. The caretaker arrived while I was taking a slow look. He's a man in his 60s named Sato. I knew him from a bicycle registration he'd helped me with. That night, he had his jacket zipped up to his chin and keys jangling from a lanyard. "Officer," he said, bowing a little without thinking. "Sorry to bring you out." "Not at all," I said. "We're getting calls from the emergency phone in Car 2. Dispatch can hear the chime in the background." "Have there been any issues tonight?" He shook his head. "No reports. I live in Block 9. If an elevator stops, usually residents call my mobile first. The emergency phone dials the elevator company and, in some cases, 110 if the line's held. But Car 2 was refurbished last year. The emergency phone routes through a module. Should be stable." He turned a key under a little flap and brought up a more detailed panel. "We can see floor positions and door status," he said. "Car 1, 1 farad, doors closed. Car 2, 7 farads, doors. It says, door open," he finished, frowning at the green LED. We both looked up at the glass of the elevator tower. Through the fog, 7 floors up, the corridor's rectangle looked dark. No shadow in the doorway, no movement, just a little breath of cold caught between glass and concrete. "Ding. Dispatch," I said quietly. "We're at the panel. It shows Car 2 at 7, doors open. Line still open?" "Affirmative," she said. "Call duration now 10 minutes. We still hear that chime. It's not one our call center recognizes. It's not the typical help tone some cars play. It's like a floor arrival chime, repeating. "Keyholder's going to open the machine room," I said. "We'll verify if the car is actually parked at 7. We took the staff stairwell up 2 flights to the machine room door. Sato unlocked it, and the smell of oil and dust came out, the scent of an old mechanical heart. The motors for both cars sat silent. The temperature inside was cold enough to make my breath visible. Indicator lights on a cabinet told the same story as downstairs. Car 1 at 1 farad. Car 2 at 7 farads. Doors open. The motors weren't warm, though. I touched the casing lightly. It had the deep cold of metal that's been sleeping. If a car had cycled up to 7 and sat there with doors open for 10 minutes, you'd usually feel warmth in the motor housing. That room felt like a temple. Sato checked the log on the controller. "Last registered movement for Car 2 was at 23:42, he said. "Car 1 did the load when the last train came. If Car 2 is sitting open, it's not because it moved just now. The system thinks it's open." He picked up a service phone mounted on the wall and pressed the button for Car 2's car-top intercom. On the other end, through a layer of hiss, something clicked, and then, very faint, the same chime came through. Ding. It sounded further away on the intercom than it did in the lobby. "Car 2 emergency phone to 110 is still open," dispatch said in my ear. No voice, just that single ding. Frequency is 27 seconds between dings, then a pause at 90 seconds. Then the pattern repeats. We went down to the 7th floor. The external corridor is narrow and concrete, lined with sliding metal doors to small entryways. At that hour, most of the lights inside were out. The only brightness was at the elevator landing, where a motion sensor brought up a low blue-white glow. The doors to Car 2 stood closed. The floor indicator showed 7 farads, no arrow. Car 1's indicator ticked from 3 farads to 2 farads. Someone had called it without our knowing. We listened for a second. Ding. The sound wasn't inside the shaft. It wasn't behind the doors. It seemed to come from the air above the landing, like it was being played in the space around us. Can we try to open it? I asked. Just to check if anyone's inside. Sato nodded. He's done this 1,000 times in the day, and it shows. He popped off a small plate, inserted an emergency key, and turned. The doors unlatched with a soft, respectable heaviness and slid. Behind them, the car sat level, empty. A stainless box reflecting our faces and the bluish light. The car's internal display showed 7 farads. The emergency phone compartment on the right-hand side had a plastic flap. He opened it. Inside, the phone module's small LED was dark. He picked up the receiver anyway, habit making his hand do it. Silence. No side tone. No click. Dispatch, I said. We've got the car open on 7. The emergency phone module appears powered down. The call is still open on your end? Affirmative, she said. We still hear the ding. It didn't change when you opened the car. No ambient noise, no voice. We stood like that for a minute, listening in a box that told us in every way it was empty. Car 1 arrived at the first floor somewhere below. Chimed like a different brand's crystal, more cheerful. A double ding. The sound came up the shaft in a familiar way. The ding we were hearing 27 seconds. Pause every 90 wasn't coming from either car. Not in a way I could put a finger on. It sounded like memory made into sound. Sometimes, Sato said quietly, not looking at me. It will stick, the indicator, even after they've swapped modules. There was an old phone in car 2 before. It had its own number. People thought you could dial out, but you couldn't. It just connected to the elevator company. When they refurbished, they kept the number on file. It shows on their system, even if it isn't there. That's the number dispatch sees? I asked. Probably. If that number dials 110, it's because the module thinks you've held the emergency button and no one answered. But this module is off. The present moment did what it does. It came back to the job, not the thinking. We checked the car again, all corners, floor to ceiling. Checked the ceiling hatch locked. Checked the gap level. Nothing. We closed the doors gently and stepped back into the corridor. The blue light timed out and went to dark. For a second, the frost on the glass of the elevator tower caught light from below and looked like a white sheet being drawn. I blinked, and it was just fog. Ding. Dispatch, I said. We're going to the lobby to see if the alarm panel captured anything else. Back downstairs, Sato scrolled through logs. Movements were normal until just before midnight. Then car 2's line read like this. Door open, 7 farads. Then nothing. No. Door closed. No. Car in motion. Like the line of text itself stopped because it had nothing to add. He shook his head. It shouldn't report door open if the module's off, he said. More to the machine than to me. But it does sometimes. It'll log the last known state. We can reboot. Before he did, I asked dispatch. Can you patch the open line to our radio on speaker? I want to see if the tone shifts when we cycle power. Copy, she said. My handheld filled with a thin hiss and then the ding, exactly as she'd described. Clean, like a bell plucked off a shelf in a quiet room. Sato powered the car down with the key. The lobby lost a little of its man-made sound, like someone pulled the plug out of a fish tank. The indicator lights sank. Metal settled. In my radio ear, the ding kept its pace. Didn't care that the car was now, officially, asleep. We waited 3 minutes. The snow did its soft glow in the glass. Somewhere, a bicycle chain whispered. The ding continued. 27 seconds, then pause, then again. Sato powered it back up. The panel woke. Car 2, it said again with fresh confidence, was at 7. Door open. Dispatch came in at a whisper. Unit Hachi-san. The open line just terminated. We heard a very soft, like, what sounded like a man's breath taken near a microphone. Then a click. The call ended at 13 minutes, 49 seconds. No further calls since. Do you want us to attempt a callback to the elevator number on file? Yes, I said. Try it. She placed the call. I could hear the precise pips of her dialing through the headsets. The ringing that came back wasn't here. It was dead air quiet. After 4 rings, a recorded voice we all recognized, the elevator company's helpline, spoke. "This number is not in service." I asked Sato to show me the old documentation. He fetched a plastic file from the caretaker closet. The inventory sheet for Block 12 had a sticker from the refurbishment last year. Under Car 2 Emergency Module, a note read, "Old line number retained in records. Routing, digital, via cabinet. Physical phone, removed." He tapped it, embarrassed and defensive at the same time. "We keep things up to date," he said. "We do." I nodded. "He does. I know he does. We rode car 1 to 7 and opened the doors again, because you always check twice when the hairs on your neck do that thing." The car was as we left it. The stainless shone. The emergency phone box LED remained dark. On the back wall, a small vinyl sticker listed instructions. "In an emergency, press and hold. Speak clearly. State your floor if you know it." Whoever printed it had spelled speak without the A. I noticed it and felt, unreasonably, like that mattered. We closed up, locked the machine room, made sure the lobby was the same kind of empty it had been when we arrived. Outside, the river made that slow, heavy winter noise it makes when it moves under a skin of ice. As we walked toward our vehicles, a single ding drifted out into the cold from 7 floors up. It sounded like a sound remembering itself. I wrote the report the way we write them. Responded to 110 calls linked to elevator emergency phone. On arrival, no person in distress located. Elevator car 2 at 7 farads, indicated door open. Car interior empty. Emergency phone module powered down. Rebooted system with key holder. Open line ended during check. Attempted callback. Number not in service. Elevator. Company notified. Maintenance scheduled. And then in the memo field, not the official text, but a note I knew our sergeant reads, I wrote, "Chime audible during entire call. Did not correspond to operating cars. Pattern fixed at 27-second intervals with periodic 90-second pause. No known source inside shaft or lobby." The next afternoon, off duty, I got a short email via the general liaison. "Technician attended. No faults found. Emergency module disconnected from public line as per previous refurbishment. Car 2 position sensor reset. No further issues observed." For the next week, nothing. Residents used the lifts like always. A child waved at me and told me his Power Rangers could fly if you throw them. But his mom says no. Ordinary life. Then, 2 weeks later, my night shift phone buzzed at 2:58. It was dispatch. "Hachi-san," she said. "We just had 5 open line 110 calls within 10 seconds. Same ID. Elevator car 2, block 12, Hikari Danshi." Each call lasted exactly 1 second. No audio. Just 5 pips. Then nothing. She hesitated. "It lined up with the top of the hour. Some systems do that, but I thought you'd want to know." We went out. When we arrived, the building felt like a building. Doors made door noises. Someone laughed 2 blocks over. Car 2 sat at the first floor. Odor of ordinary human. And nothing. No chime. No sound that didn't belong. If you've never written the same address into your logbook 3 times for something that doesn't land on anything, it's easy to say crossed wires or bad module or forgotten number in a switch at the telco. It could be. I'm open to the simplest version. But what stayed with me wasn't the technical part. It was standing in a lit box that reflected my uniform back at me and hearing a sound in the air that came at its own interval, like a ghost of a routine. Not a person lost. Not a threat. Just something that wanted to finish a loop. We make calls when we need help or when habit makes our hand reach out. Maybe a space can have a habit. Maybe an elevator that once opened and dinged at 7 for a man getting home late for 30 years remembered how to call when no one stepped out. We show up anyway. That's the job. We don't argue with a sound about whether it's allowed to play. We note what we heard. We lock the doors we opened. We go back to our patrol. And if, for a month after, I heard a soft ding when I walked past the vending machine by the Koban. I didn't say anything to the new officer on probation working with me. He'll have his own sound to carry around soon enough. Story number 4. I'm a senior constable with a regional station in New South Wales. Night shift suits me. Country roads. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own tires on the chip seal. Roos hesitating at the fence line. Servo neon turning the bonnet paint a weird sort of blue. If you've worked out here, you know the way the bush changes after midnight. It's not dead. It just tucks its noise into the folds. You learn to listen for the wrong sound. That's the job most nights. Listen. Go have a look. Write it up straight. It was late winter, a Tuesday sliding into Wednesday. Wind coming off the range had teeth in it. I just cleared from a stray stock call 2 escape artists of steers back in their paddock, and an apology to a farmer who swore blind his gate latch had a mind of its own when comms came over the set. Voice clipped in a way that makes your shoulders lift. 2-6. Bravo. Copy priority. 000 via AMSA. Personal locator beacon activation in your district. Land-based. Lat divided by long to follow. No voice contact. Weather precludes helicopter at this time. SES notified. Can you attend and coordinate initial search? 2-6 Bravo copied, I said. Send the grid. What have we got from AMSA on the beacon ID? Stand by, comm said. Patching AMSA duty officer to your mobile. If you've never dealt with the beacon side, AMSA is the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. They look after distress beacons across the country. Not just at sea. When a PLB goes off on land, it still hits satellites. They ring us if it resolves to scrub and rocks instead of waves. I tucked into a turnout and grabbed my mobile as it buzzed. Senior Constable? A calm voice with a city edge. I'm Nigel, AMSA duty. We've got a 406 MHz activation popping near Woomera Range, western side of your LGA. Initial burst put it on or near Ridgeline track, about 4 clicks north of the old communications tower. It's unregistered. No details attached. We're getting intermittent confirmation from Miosar. No homing available at your end unless someone local's got 121.5 kit. Copy, I said. Weather here is fine on the ground, cold, bit of wind, clear enough. What's the update rate like? Odd, he said, and I could hear him looking at a screen. First hit at 147, then nothing for 3 minutes. Then 3 bursts in quick succession, which isn't standard behavior. PLBs usually transmit at regular intervals. The position refined to a corridor along the ridge. It's moving at a walking pace, or we're getting a series of errors that mimic movement. Either way, we're treating as real until proven otherwise. Righto, I said. Says are spinning up? They are. Their duty controller says they're 15 out from the shed, then they'll head to your side of the park. Without a helo, you're going to be our first eyes. We can text you the grid. The text came with the little beep. I pulled it up, numbers that for most people are just numbers. Out here we learn to picture them. Ridgeline track's a rough contour cut that locals use to get to the lookouts when the weather's good. At 2 in the morning in winter, you don't find the nice views. You find rock and stringy bark and the occasional wombat that will not shift no matter your badge. I let comms know I was going bush. Sarge came up on the channel. 2-6? You want another unit? Negative at this stage, Sarge, I said. SES inbound. I'll update once I make the trailhead. The bitumen turned to gravel, then to a sort of red grit that eats your tires if you let it. I put the cruiser in low, where the incline made itself known. The stars were bright enough to be a little arrogant. The wind in the tops of the gums sounded like someone running a finger over corduroy. The turnoff to Ridgeline had a galvanized gate. The sign said, "Closed after heavy rain." The ground had that winter dryness that makes grass shatter. I eased through, locked the gate behind me habit, even at 2 a.m., and rolled on to the little car park that looks like 3 scratches in the dirt. I killed the engine, stepped out, and the cold took a bite out of the tip of my nose for free. The sort of cold that makes the battery in your torch feel like it's thinking about its life choices. I called Nigel back. I'm at the trailhead. Any fresh pings? Affirmative, he said. It just burst again. It's about 800 meters along the track from your position, plus or minus a bit. Bearing looks to be north-northwest. If you walk the track, you should be moving towards it. Copy. SES or 15 out, I said. I'll step off and see what I can see. If I'm not in reliable radio coverage, I'll call you when I get a bar. Understood. One more thing, he added, voice getting that careful tone. We matched the distress ID against historical data. The string aligns with a PLB that was deregistered in 2013. It was listed as disposed. But sometimes people forget to actually throw things out, and they live in a drawer. So potentially someone dusted off an old unit that still has charge. That said, charge after that long would be unlikely, but not impossible. I told him cheers and set off. The first part of Ridgeline Track is friendly packed dirt, a couple of shallow steps built by people who know what they're doing. Then it gets honest. The gravel shifts under your boots. The rock says no in surprising places. The stringy bark leans in and drags at your sleeves like someone who wants to tell you a story. My breath made a little fog. Somewhere off to the left, a boo book called its own name, and something small and bold skittered out of my torch beam because it had better things to do. 5 minutes in, comms cut in faint. 2. 6. SES have paged 2 units, 4 members. They'll stage at the gate. Advise when you want them to follow. Copy, I said, and kept walking. My radio signal bars drop out on that slope. You learn which rocks are the good ones to stand on if you want to make a call. At the first hairpin, I checked the text again. Nigel sent a second location. The numbers had crept as if someone was ambling the same track I was. The distance between first and second points, call it 80-90 meters. A human pace, with the little hesitations that mean, I looked at a tree, or I adjusted my pack. I did the call out you do when you think someone could be within earshot. Police, I called, not hard or angry. Just so it carried. If you can hear me, call back. You're not in trouble. We're coming to you. Nothing but wind and leaf. At a bend where the track sidles up against a cut rock face, there's a notice board with a faded map, perspex scratched into a constellation of old initials. Someone had stuck one of those visitor logbooks in a plastic-lidded box under it a year or two ago, the kind bushwalkers sometimes use. Half the entries are, Great Walk, with 4 exclamation points. Some are the names of birds. I popped the lid not to touch, but to see if there was any note like, stuck, back in an hour. The last entry was 4 days old. A simple line and a time. Underneath, in writing that made me think of someone's dad, a careful blockhand, closing the loop. I moved on. The next ping came in. My phone buzzed where I'd wedged it into my radio strap. The dot had edged another 100 meters, hugging the track. No noise. No light that wasn't mine. The cold bit harder in the little dips where air pools. The smell of the bush went metallic like someone had rubbed a coin on the back of your hand. About 20 minutes from the car, the track runs narrow on a saddle with drops to either side that make you feel like you should hold your breath. I stopped there, not out of fear, just because stopping there is what you do. Let your eyes adjust. Let the ears tell you if the bush is pushing something back at you. My torch found 2 sets of prints in the powdery surface. One fresh mine and one older. Boots. Decent tread. Heading in the same direction. They were shallow enough that I couldn't tell age with any confidence. The wind here scrubs prints quicker than you'd think. 2. 6 Bravo, comm said, thin and a bit warbly. Says on scene at the gate. They'll step off on your say. Have them hold 10, I said. I'm still alone on the track. I'll mark the route with glow and get them a bearing. We carry little snap lights. Everyone laughs at them until they need one. I cracked 2, shook them to life, and hooked them low on branches at 2 bends that tend to confuse people on the way back. Nigel texted again, a little further, then a small sideways hop like whoever was carrying the beacon stepped off the track to look at a view. My map told me that would be the little spur that leads to a rock ledge locals call the Shelf. Good place to see the lights of town if the haze is down. I went that way. The Shelf is one of those places that looks like it was designed to be an accident but is actually quite safe if you behave yourself. Flat, rough, rock. A scatter of twisted tea tree. The wind collects there and hums in a way that makes teeth sit on edge. I angled my torch low to keep my night sight. Scanned for any reflection that would tell me metal or plastic. Nothing. No pack, no hat, no wrapper, no scuff that wasn't weather. I stood very still. There's a sound at 3 in the morning in winter out here, a kind of high, thin hiss that isn't wind and isn't insect. It's the noise that the land makes when it's cold and awake. I don't have a better word for it. In that, I thought I heard a click, not a twig, a click like a button pushed on something small. Then nothing. Nigel rang. "We just had 3 bursts in sequence," he said, voice more alive. "Same corridor. The pattern is consistent with a PLB that's cycling on and off in a way we can't account for. Position put you within 20 to 30 meters at the last hit." "I'm at the shelf," I said. "Nothing visible. I'll sweep back to the main line and keep moving." "Understood." For what it's worth, the distress ID we're seeing is a perfect match to that 2013 Dereg, including checksum. The chance of a collision, that is, 2 beacons with identical IDs, is vanishingly small. "Copy." I didn't have anything helpful to add to that. I went on. SES radioed on our TAC channel. "Police, SES Alpha. 2 members stepping off. We've got torches, first aid, blankets. No DF gear for 121.5. We're following your tire tracks to the gate, then the track. Can you mark the side trail to the saddle? It gets a bit squiggly." "Done," I said. "Keep chatter to minimum in case someone's trying to listen for us." The track climbed. When I hit the point where the old comms tower service road crosses, the ground flattened and the wind shoved at my jacket like it had finally decided we could be friends. My phone buzzed again, but the dot had done something new. Instead of moving forward, it had hopped back. Not far, 50 meters or so. Then forward again. Then a sideways burp that put it off the track entirely, where there is nothing but a tangle of scrub. Then back on. Nigel sent a text. "Weird drift, or someone dithering, or a bad bounce off terrain. Keep eyes open." The duty voice came back. "You're likely within 10 meters at some point in the next 2 minutes if it keeps this pace." I did the call out again. "Police, if you can hear me, call out. I'm alone up here at the moment. You're not in trouble. We're here to help." The only thing that answered was a gust that made the stringy bark drop a strip of loose bark like confetti. My torch caught something pale in a crack in the rock. I bent. It was the corner of a paper map, the old topographic style, curling and gone soft at the edges with damp from who knows when. No writing on it. Nothing to give me a name. I marked the spot on my GPS and sent it to comms. "Just in case," I said. "Not proof, just a thing." "Logged," comms said, and I heard her scratch it on paper in my head. "We hit a point on the ridge where, if you step 3 paces to the east, your phone goes from no bars to 1 bar if the weather's in a mood to be nice." The second I got that sliver of service, my mobile lit up with 2 messages from Nigel. "We have a pause in transmissions." And then, 30 seconds later, "We have 2 hits simultaneously, 1 near your last, 1 back near the trailhead. Could be a mirrored bounce from the satellites, but we don't see that often landside. Stand by." 2 hits, I said aloud, mostly to the night. I've heard of ghosting on radios. I've called into comms and heard my own voice lurch back at me a half-second later. Satellites aren't perfect. I know that. But the way he said it made the back of my neck do that quiet prickle like the land telling you it has its own way of keeping time. SES came up behind me then. 2 sets of breaths you can recognize as people you've met before. "Evening?" one of them said, and even whispered it sounded like a joke. "Cold enough for you?" "Always," I said, and felt my chest drop a notch with the comfort of not being solo. Beacons playing silly buggers. Nigel seeing weird behavior. We'll push onto the lookouts, then swing a dogleg back. You 2 take the short edge to the drainage line and listen. No hero moves. We did the work. We searched properly. The way you're supposed to. Torches low to catch shine. Calling at intervals. Quiet in between. We check the places people step when they don't think about stepping. We look for slope scrapes, for a hat snagged in tea tree, for a bottle caught at a rock. We found none of those things. The only marks on the ground besides ours were old, faint, and going in both directions like someone who had done this walk a dozen times and never needed us. Nigel texted again at 03:12. "Signal at rest. Last good fix near Quartz Ledge. No further bursts for 4 minutes. Treat as last known. We went to Quartz Ledge. It looks like what it sounds like: white rock that catches every bit of light you bring and pushes it back at you in a way that makes depth hard to judge. There's a little metal sign there with one bolt missing that clacks in the wind like a polite cough. On the underside of the sign, someone had stuck a sticker years ago from a trail race that doesn't run anymore. It flapped a little like a moth. I don't know why I noticed that. You remember the small wrongs. I spoke to the bush like I would to someone sat on a step. If you can hear me, press your beacon again, I said. Words simple. Nothing complicated to carry. We're here. We'll warm you up. We'll get you out. The wind fell out for a second. Just a single second. Everything paused. Even the little hiss the land makes in winter stopped. And in that single second, way down in the noise of the night, I heard a sound like a watch tick against a table. Not a beep. Not a radio thing. A tick. Then the noise of the world came back, and it was very silly to have ever thought that mattered. At 3:21, Nigel rang, voice gentle in a way that tells you the person on the other end has had long nights too. We've had cessation, he said. No signal for 8 minutes now, and with the pattern we were seeing, we'd expect at least one more burst. We'll keep the satellites listening for a while, but I'm going to mark it as last known at Quartz Ledge. If you can put eyes and boots on every sensible place within 100 meters and you find nothing, we'll start talking about a dawn sweep. I'm sorry. I know that's frustrating. Understood, I said. We did what he asked. We checked the sensible places. We checked a few that weren't. We worked slow, kept safe, did the things our mentors banged into our heads when we were new. We found nothing that needed us. We came off the ridge just before first light slid a pale edge under the eastern clouds. SES members were quiet in that satisfied way of people who would keep going all day if you let them, but know when to stop doing unhelpful things. The kookaburras started on the flats below like a clock had switched them on. At the trailhead, my cruiser looked like a thing from a bright world someone had parked in the wrong painting. I rang Nigel at the base. He said, "We ran the distress ID through old records again. The beacon belonged to a hiker from Interstate sold via a shop that closed in 2012. The record shows the owner notified us the unit was destroyed after the battery expired. Sometimes that's paperwork people do, so they don't forget to do the actual disposal. It could be as simple as that someone kept it and pressed it, but the power curves we observed would be unusual for a 10-year dead battery. I'm not going to lie to you. It's one of the stranger profiles I've seen for a land activation. What do you want in the report?" I asked. "The truth," he said, and I liked him for it. "You searched. You found nothing. You heard nothing. You saw nothing. An unregistered beacon pinged on a ridge and then stopped. We'll log it. If it happens again, we'll ring you again." I wrote it the way we write things for other people to read in offices with coffee. Responded to 000 via AMSA for PLB activation. Proceeded to Ridgeline track. Liaised with SES. Searched from trailhead to Quartz Ledge. No person located. No visual on beacon or equipment. Signal ceased at 321 hours. Area to be rechecked at first light. Nothing else noted. I didn't put the watch tick in. That's for cups of tea later. At first light, we walked it again with more boots. Same answer. We closed it off. You don't forget a nothing like that, though. They stick a call that shows up, asks you to listen very carefully, and then slips out of range, polite as you like. A month later, at nearly the same ridiculous hour, comms put me through to Nigel again. "You're going to roll your eyes at me," he said, almost smiling in his voice. "We've just had 5 single burst hits from the same ID. They fell exactly on the minute, 5 minutes to the hour through the hour. No position too short to resolve." Then nothing. We didn't roll units that time. You can't chase a shadow with nothing to grab. The next week, nothing. The next, nothing. The park stayed a park. People walked, took photos, put birds in their apps. The sticker under the Quartz Ledge sign finally let go and went somewhere small things go. If you ask me what I think, I'll tell you the thing I tell myself so I can sleep. The bush remembers, not just in a spooky way. In the way dirt remembers a boot and slowly forgets it. In the way a man who walked a track a dozen times might get old, sell his gear, throw out a beacon, maybe not, and still Somewhere in the quiet at 3 in the morning, the route he took sings along a thin bit of sky metal that doesn't know it's supposed to be done. We show up. We go look. We don't argue about what a signal is allowed to be. We make sure there isn't a person. We walk back down and lock the gate the way we found it. We keep an ear out for a tick that isn't ours, and we don't put it in the report. Story number 5. I'm a patrol officer with the state police in a mostly rural district in northern Germany. Night shift out here is long, straight roads through pine forest, miles of reflective posts sliding past, and small towns where a church clock still marks the hour, even if no one is awake to hear it. If you've done this kind of shift, you know the rhythm quiet until it isn't. Then it turns practical. You drive, you look, you write down exactly what happened. No more, no less. It was late autumn, just past 2:30 in the morning. The air had that metallic edge it gets when frost has taken the fields clean, a little like opening a cold toolbox. My call sign that night was 1241. I was paired with a younger partner, Wagner, who still kept a small paper notebook even though the tablet was right there. The radio was calm weather updates, a distant drunk driver stop we weren't needed on when dispatch broke in with the kind of tone that pulls your shoulders up even if you'd been thinking about coffee. Unit 1241, emergency call coming in through 110, the operator said. Open line, no voice. Automated record says the call came from an old roadside emergency pillar on the K28 between Langenfeld and Bruch, at the pull-off named Fichtenblick. The highway maintenance office advises that pillar was removed last year. Can you attend and check? Copy, I said, turning off the main road toward the sign for the K28 and, by extension, a lot of trees. If you've never dealt with those old roadside emergency call pillars, here's the short of it: they were orange with a big blue SOS. You lifted the flap, pressed the button, and it routed you to help. Police via 110 or fire and rescue via 112. Out here, some had been removed, some lingered as nostalgia, some just died and nobody missed them. According to our system, this particular pillar was long gone. We rolled through the last village, past a bakery that was dark except for a soft glow from a proofing cabinet, then out into the stretch where pines crowd up to the shoulder. The pull-off, called Fichtenblick, is really just a lay-by 2 picnic tables, a bin, a view of identical trees. The wind through the pines made that steady shushing sound, like a polite request to lower your voice. As we approached, dispatch came back. For info, she said, steady and neutral. We still have the open line. We can hear what sounds like passing cars, but no voice. The audio is consistent. No wind noise. Do you want me to patch it so you can hear? Yes, please, I said. Patch us. A second later, the background of our primary channel changed. Under the carrier, there was the sound of road noise you get through a closed car window, a low rush with a faint whine. Every 50 seconds, a tiny, clinical beep ticked in the background. It was the kind of sound you might miss unless someone told you to listen for it. We pulled into Fichtenblick. The lay-by is a crescent of asphalt with a gravel lip. The bin rattled at that odd frequency bins pick up when the wind is just right. The picnic tables had a thin skin of frost on them. There was no orange pillar. There was an empty square of concrete with 4 bolts where one had stood. 1241 on scene, I said. No pillar visible, just the base with bolts. No vehicles, no people. Copy, dispatch said. We still hear the background on the open line. The number in our system matches the old pillar identifier. The highway maintenance office confirms it was removed last October. No call routing remains on their side. Very odd. Wagner crouched at the concrete pad and touched one of the bolt heads with his gloved fingertip, showing me the tiny crescent of dirt that had built up where a base plate would have once shielded it. It was here, he said. No question. We did what you do. Quick perimeter, lights low. The pines swallowed the torch beams at 10 meters like they were doing us a favor. The tire tracks in the gravel where old rain had softened the edges, and the frost made them vague. No fresh footprints. No bet someone had nosed a car into the trees. On our radio, the patched audio hummed. That soft beep came again, right on schedule. It didn't make me afraid. It made me itchy. The way you feel when 2 facts won't line up. There was no phone here. The line we were hearing was supposed to be coming from a thing that no longer existed. But sound is sound. Dispatch, I asked. Do you have a time mark on that beep? Is it something from your equipment or from the line? Negative, she said. It's coming with the call. Interval is about 50 seconds, then a pause every few minutes, as if something restarts. It isn't our side. We check the small things. Whether the old conduit that had fed the pillar had truly been capped, Wagner found the stub. A metal pipe at the edge of the pad, with a plastic plug sealed in with tar. I put my hand near it. Nothing warm. The tar was cold and hard, the kind of cold that belongs to things that no longer do anything. Headlights swung slowly into the lay-by. For a heartbeat, I braced for someone who might want to upgrade our night from odd to complicated. It was the highway maintenance truck, yellow, with a man named Rudy I knew by sight leaning on the wheel. He had the posture of somebody who has spent years watching people do ridiculous things with trailers. "Sorry to drag you out," he said, stepping down. "We got the ping from dispatch. There was a work order about this pillar last October." We pulled it and cut the line at the junction box by the forestry road. Nothing should be calling from here. He walked to the pad and nudged a bolt hole with the toe of his boot. "We even dug out the foundation," he added, almost apologizing to the concrete under our feet. "Could the line still be active upstream?" Wagner asked. "Only if someone left a ghost in the cable," Rudy said, half smiling, half frowning. He was joking, but he also had the tone of a man tapping a part to see what sound comes back. Realistically, the copper's in the ground, sure, but it's dead. And the system those pillars used for routing calls was decommissioned. The ones that remain use mobile modules now. The old copper units are just bones. On our radio, as if to politely disagree, the background beeped again right on time. If you told me that tiny sound reached up and touched the inside of my ear with a cold finger, I wouldn't argue. We took a slow walk along the verge in both directions, torchlight on reflectors, those flat-eyed white markers looking back. The K-28 at that hour is steady one car every few minutes, headlight cones sliding along the pines, then gone. Passing cars sounded like passing cars in the air. The audio over the patch sounded like passing cars. Remembered, that was the difference. It had no depth, no space. It was a pressed flower of a sound. "Dispatch," I said. "Can you route the open line to our duty phone too? Not just the radio? I want to listen while we move around." "Copy," she said. She rang the duty mobile we carry, and I put it on speaker between us. The little phone speaker made that neat, compressed noise. The beep arrived again, obedient, like a metronome with a schedule. We were 3 meters from a pillar that no longer existed, listening to audio that shouldn't exist, logged under an ID tag retired a year ago, patched by an operator who had not once made a joke. If I had to point to the moment the hair on my arms lifted, it was when the church in Langenfeld rang 2:45 soft through the real trees, and the call in our phone rang them too, a fraction late, as if the call was hearing the world from one step behind us. "Echo?" Wagner asked quietly. "Maybe," I said, because maybe covers a lot of ground when you can't test the air. We went with Rudy to the junction box where he said they'd cut the old pillar line. It isn't far, just a gravel pull-off and a metal cabinet that looks like it could keep out a determined fox. He unlocked it and swung the door open. Inside, bundles of cables were neatly tied, each with a small plastic tag. One tag's glue had gone lazy and hung at an angle. Rudy pointed with a blunt finger. "That was the pillar," he said. "Disconnected here, and again at the other end. There's no power, no dial tone. It's nothing. If you put your head in a box like that, you hear tiny hums from the larger network beyond and your own breath." We listened. There was nothing active in there. Rudy tapped a plastic block. "If you want, I can clip on a tone generator," he said, half already reaching for his van. "Let's do it," I said. "Even when your instinct says nothing, the job says check." He returned with a small tester and clipped it to the dead pair that once fed the pillar. The gadget sang its own little song. A peep peep. We walked 30 meters down and, as expected, the inductive wand he carried found the line under the verge. It was perfect, clean proof the pair existed physically, not electrically. In other words, the system in front of us matched the record. A dead thing. Mapped and quiet. On our phone, the open line call continued. The same steady road noise, the same faint beep, the same tidy pause every few minutes, like a breath taken on a routine. There was no change when we opened the cabinet, no change when he added the test tone to the dead pair. Whatever we were hearing, we weren't influencing it by doing the real-world work in front of us. Dispatch came back, quieter. "For info," she said, "we're receiving 2 instances of the same call now. 2 open lines, both showing the old pillar's ID. The second call is delayed about 1 second behind the first. Both have identical audio. We can't terminate either on our end. They terminate at 3 minutes 30 seconds or hold for 6 minutes, then redial after 60 seconds. It's very tidy." We looked at each other in that way partners do when the box you're supposed to work in gets bigger than you planned. We walked the ditch line because it felt responsible. We scanned for anything that reflected at the wrong angle: metal, plastic, glass. We found an empty bottle wedged in grass that had been there long enough to scuff up. We saw, 50 meters down, a fox cross the road neat as a thought. It paused, looked at us, and melted into the trees. A car hissed by. On our phone, 1 second later, a car hissed by again. After we had done all the practical things twice, there was a soft relay-like click over the patched call, and the audio cut to silence. Dispatch took a breath we could hear. "Both lines just terminated," she said. Very soft click. Then nothing. No further calls at this time. We cleared the lay-by. Rudy shook his head with that particular tolerance people in maintenance develop for systems behaving in ways they weren't designed to. He went back to a thermos and a warm bed. We took the slow road to the station because after something that sits in your head like that, speed feels disrespectful. We tested the coffee and found it performing like coffee at 4 in the morning, barely functional, but trying. I rang our liaison at the phone company the next day, off duty, because some things keep tapping your shoulder while you wash a cup. A man with a careful voice told me the old route used by that pillar had been fully retired. "If anything called you," he said, kind, not skeptical, "it didn't call through us." Then he added, almost like a confession, "Systems remember in odd ways. A switch that hasn't been asked to do a thing in a year might, under the right conditions, replay what it thinks that thing sounded like. That's for our engineers to worry about, not police." 2 weeks later, right after 3 in the morning, dispatch put another unit on the same location. Same pattern, 2 open lines, same ID, no voice, audio of passing cars, faint beep. They stood where we stood, listened to what we listened to, reported what we reported. The highway maintenance office shrugged in the same rhythm. The call stopped again. I wrote the report the way reports are supposed to read. Responded to 110 open line linked to decommissioned roadside emergency pillar at Fichtenblick Lay, by along K28. On arrival, pillar absent. Only base and bolts present. Area checked. No persons, no vehicles, no signs of distress. Open line audio consisted of ambient road noise and periodic beep. No voice heard. Highway maintenance confirmed pillar removed and line disconnected at junction. Telecom notified via dispatch. No further action possible at time. I left out the part where the church bells in the call lagged the bells in the real air by the length of a breath, because you don't put the feeling of a thing into a field that asks for fact. In daylight, Fichtenblick is an unremarkable place to eat a sandwich. The empty square where the pillar stood is just that. An empty square with 4 bolts looking up at the sky. If the calls come again some night, the closest unit will go. They'll listen. They'll feel the tug we felt. That sense of a routine being carried out by something that no longer exists in the way we define exists. They'll do the work, and they'll go back to the station, write it down clean, and keep an ear open the next time the radio does that subtle intake before it gives you a job. What stayed with me wasn't that a non-existent pillar called us. It wasn't the delayed echo or the metronome beep that gave the call a heartbeat it didn't need. It was how the whole thing behaved like a habit. 3 minutes 30 on, 1 minute off, redial. As if a device that had stood for 20 years making polite phone calls for people with flat tires and locked doors had a closing routine and didn't see why removing it should remove that. If you do this job long enough, you learn to respect routines, theirs and yours. A call comes in. You go. You look. You listen. Maybe what needed answering that night wasn't a person but a leftover gesture from a system that spent its working life asking for help on behalf of other people. We show up anyway. That's the job. We don't argue with a sound about whether it's allowed to play. We note what we heard, We touch the cold tar of a conduit that isn't warm, and we feel exactly what the night gives us. We clear with nothing found. And we carry the echo, the way we carry any late shift quietly, folded away, ready to be compared to someone else's echo over coffee when the sun has finally decided to join in again. Story number 6. I'm a constable with a Royal Canadian Mounted Police detachment that covers a lot of prairie, a few small towns, and more gravel grid roads than anyone can count without a map on their knee. Nights here are straight horizons and a sky so wide it can make you feel like you're driving inside a bowl. In winter, the cold does something to sound. You'll hear a truck from farther away. The wind a little sharper. Your own boots like glass on crusted snow. If you've worked up here, you know how simple the job gets at 3 in the morning. Listen to the radio. Go where you're sent. Put light on dark things. Write it the way it was. It was January, -32, with a wind that made it bite closer to -40. It was around 2:18 a.m. Our calls had been quiet, a welfare check that was fine, a false alarm on a shop back door. I'd just rolled past a closed curling rink to make sure the plow hadn't piled the entrance shut when our PSAP came up on the air. The tone they use for priority isn't dramatic. It just has a way of straightening your posture. Delta 2 to 1, the call taker said, steady and clipped. We've got an automatic 911 from a vehicle telematics provider. Reported airbag deployment, single vehicle, no voice on callback. Lat divided by long resolves to Township Road 432 at Range Road 3170 near the old steel bridge crossing. Time of trigger 2114. Telematics is patched and standing by. Are you able to attend? Delta 2-1 copy is, I said. En route. It doesn't matter how many false positives you've run, you hear airbag, and your hands do the rest. I was already turning south, watching for the familiar snow fences and the single yard light that floats out there on its own like a star. The laptop in my cruiser bloomed the CAD card. Coordinates. A short note. Provider indicates 2004 passenger car associated. Subscription not current. And a box waiting for updates. The telematics rep came onto my secondary ear courtesy of our dispatcher. A calm, warmed-up voice from somewhere far away. Constable, she said. Thank you. My name is Kayla. We're receiving an automated event from a vehicle device reporting frontal crash and restraint tensioner activation. There is no audio from the cabin and no response to prompts. We show location within a 50-meter circle at the coordinates your dispatcher has. Copy, I said. What's the last comms you have with the unit? Do you have VIN or color to share? Stand by, she said, and her keyboard ticked at a speed I've come to associate with overnight call centers. VIN indicates a 2004 model year sedan. Our records show the service was canceled in 2013. We don't typically receive events from non-subscribed devices, but crash events are sometimes configured to route regardless. The device is attempting to open the vehicle's mic, but we cannot hear cabin audio. Understood, I said. Do you have heading and speed prior to the trigger? Negative. No prior breadcrumb trail, she said. The device woke with the crash flag. I keyed over to dispatch. Comms, Delta 2 to 1. I'm 6 minutes out. Can we get fire page to stand by at the road and EMS en route, but stage until I confirm? Affirmative, the dispatcher said. We've got EMS clearing the bay. Fire hall is toned. 223 is coming from town. He's 10 out. The road out there is a grid in the old survey way, mile-long lines that meet at perfect right angles, broken only by coulees and the odd slough. The old steel bridge on my CAD was gone. The RM had removed it last summer, leaving the truss on blocks like a dinosaur rib, and building a new crossing 2 concessions over. People still say, meet me at the old bridge. The way language keeps dead landmarks alive. I'd been to that corner once since the removal, and remembered the drift patterns. Snow likes to make the world look different after midnight. You pick a fence line and hold it. I came up on 432 and 3,170, tires ticking over the ridges the grader leaves when the blade skates too fast. My headlights pushed a clean cone out ahead, flakes streaming like a million small decisions. There were no other lights, no hazard flashers, no vehicle sitting stupid in a ditch, and no tail flickers up ahead. I slowed and eased to the gravel lip, where the old approach would have climbed to the bridge, a sawhorse barricade, Reflective tape frosting with rhyme marked the end. Beyond it, a dark cut where the creek ran when it ran. In January, it sleeps under a cap of ice and drift. Comms, I said. I'm at the coordinates. I see the former bridge site. No vehicle visible on the roadway. I'm going to step out and do a line search. Have 223 come to me. We'll split the ditch. Copy. Delta 2 to 1, she said. For your awareness, telematics reports device link re-established for 10 seconds, then dropped. They're still on the line if you want them. Patch them, I said, and the call center voice flowed back in. Constable, Kayla said. We saw a heartbeat from the device just now. No voice. We can attempt a horn or light flash if the vehicle supports it. But given the age, we likely cannot. Copy, I said, already stepping into the cold. The air bit my cheekbones. Snow had a way of shining without heat. My breath made a small aurora in my headlamp glow. I took a long look before I looked close. You'd be amazed how easily you can miss a car if you aim your eyes wrong. No fresh tracks leading over the cut. No broken barricade. The drifts against the sawhorse were smooth as icing. I walked the shoulder first, then down into the ditch. The world lost 10 degrees down there. You learn to listen for the scuff of plastic in snow, the odd little tuk that a cooling engine can make even after it's gone quiet. I heard wind, far-off grain bin ribs flexing, and the tiny squeal of snow crystals against my pant leg. Nothing else. Kayla, I said into the patch. Do you have an exact timestamp on the airbag flag? 2:1:14 and 30 seconds, she said. And we just received a seatbelt status chime. Device reports belt unlatched during event and latched again 9 seconds later. I can't confirm a person did that, or whether the device misreported. Across the prairie, a train gave one long mournful. Out of habit, I counted the seconds between its horn and the little ringing over the phone line. It was there a faint, delayed tremolo on the call, like we were listening to the same night from a step behind. It wasn't dramatic. It was just off enough to make the hair on my wrist tick even under 3 layers of clothes. I crossed to the other side, scanned the opposite ditch, and walked the drift edges, looking for the way snow behaves when a heavy thing has gone where it shouldn't. After wind, snow skins over quick. Even so, disturbed snow reads as different. I didn't see it. My boot knocked something small and hard. I bent and found a piece of brittle blue plastic, a shard the size of a thumb from a bumper or a grill, weathered, edges abraded by grit. I held it to my light. Old. Not the glossy new break of a fresh collision. Could be from any of 100 silly moments before the bridge was taken out. I pocketed it anyway, habit telling me the integrity of small things matters when you write later. 223 pulled up behind me then, his light bar off but takedowns throwing soft daylight on the barricade. He got out, shook his head at the cold. Who did we upset to earn this weather? He said, breathing steam. Telematics crash at the old bridge, I said. No vehicle in sight. Device says airbag and belt. Provider is on the ear. We're going to walk the banks either side and check the flats. We did what you do. 2 officers, 10 meters apart, in a straight line. Torches low to catch reflection. Eyes tuned for angles that don't belong. Headlight lenses. License plate sheen. Glass. We called out at intervals the way you do when you want sound to land if it can. Police? If you can hear me, call out. You're not in trouble. We're here to help. The wind peeled our voices and put them back down a field away. Constable, Kayla said, her tone unflappable. Our device is sending short bursts, 15 seconds online, 45 off. The pattern is regular. We're hearing a faint ticking on the line, like an indicator. Could you confirm if you hear it in your environment? I stood still and let the night settle. There it was, not coming from the ditch, not from the road, not from any place my ears could point to. A turn signal tick, the exact frequency every driver has sat with at a red light, soft as an insect in a jar. It was in my ear more than in the world. On the patch it ticked too, half a breath late. Affirmative, I said. We're hearing a tick here and on the patch, off by a beat. 223 gave me a look that said he heard it as well and didn't feel like saying it out loud. He swept his beam down into the creek bed. The cut was a clean, scooped shape with ice that showed wind-carved ripples frozen like fingerprints. No fresh break, no sumped vehicle, no hole breathing up engine heat. Comms, I said. Have fire and EMS stage at the Township Road intersection. We'll update. Advise them no entry onto the ice. It's drifted over some spots thin. Copy, the dispatcher said. They're staged. For info, telematics is adding details on the vehicle. Your CAD will update. The laptop chimed. A line appeared. Historical subscriber. Gray sedan. Last dealer service in 2011. Front airbags replaced 2009 recall. Subscription ended. Device model. CDMA era. 223 whistled under his breath. CDMA's off, he said. Old network. Mostly, I said. Some carriers kept it alive longer than others. But out here? We both knew the answer. Our towers go dark and light based on deals bigger than us. Constable, Kayla said, as if she'd been reading my thought. I appreciate this is odd. Our records indicate the device type is from a generation that would not be expected to successfully originate a call on current networks. And yet we are receiving crash event bursts and have an open line. Could your network be simulating an event? 223 asked, pitching his voice so it would carry to the phone. Like a test? No, she said. We have test events, but they route to our internal console only and display differently. This looks like a true device. We work 20 more minutes along the ditches and the edges where drifts make shallow bowls. Nothing. Not a reflector out of place. Not a bit of trim with a fresh snap. The only living thing that wasn't weather was a jackrabbit that decided we were boring and unworthy of even a thump. My eyelashes had the frost you get when you've breathed your own breath into your hat too long. Kayla updated the same way a good operator does. Short, factual, no speculation. We've had 3 more 15-second connects, she said. We're hearing a seatbelt reminder chime now and then, at the exact friendlier tone used in the early 2000s for North American sedans. I have a map from your dispatcher. The events appear to originate in a line that runs from the north side of the old bridge site to the south side, but the points are within the same 50-meter circle, 223. And I stood at the barricade and let that sit. If it were a real car and had struck something, we'd expect tracks, disturbed snow, a broken sawhorse, a trail into the cut, the raw smell of a dark engine bent out of place. The night didn't have any of those extras. It had ticking and a delayed nighttime. Kayla, I said, does your device have any record memory? Like, could it be replaying cabin tones from the moment of impact that your system is feeding to us late? Negative, she said. These devices send live. They don't store audio for later transmission. We do occasionally have delayed delivery of data congestion, tower handoffs, you know. But audio? Not like this. Fire popped their lights at the intersection, then went dark. EMS did the same good partners who know when to conserve battery and keep things calm. The wind laid down for a minute, the way it does sometimes, a moment of truce. In that thin air, the ticking in the patch became almost the only sound. Constable, Kayla said quietly. We just received a systems note that this device's last service address was an RM lot on this road. That could be a dealer demo entry, nothing more. But if there is any signage or infrastructure remaining from the old bridge, the device's internal GPS could error to that. Copy, I said. We're standing by a barricade and a sign that says, road closed. Ice has drifted up and over the old approach. No street light, no power. We stayed long enough to call it responsible. We laid glow sticks on the sawhorse so nobody would nose into it before sunrise. We marked waypoints on the laptop where we'd walked and took photos of nothing so we could attach them to something. The ticking on the patch continued, and then, without a crescendo, it stopped. There was a soft click like a relay in an old radio, and then just the normal sound of the radio at 3 in the morning. Constable, Kayla said after a beat. Our device ceased transmission. Event ended at 2:55. No further connects since. We'll leave a monitor on and notify your PSAP if it resumes. Thank you, I said. Can you send any documentation to dispatch? I'll include it in our report. Absolutely, she said. And for what it's worth, I believe you. It's not something you hear from a stranger in the night very often. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about a shared puzzle and an agreement to write it as it was. We cleared the scene and swept the concession roads in a slow square just to satisfy the part of the brain that refuses to accept a near thing. Fire and EMS went back to warm bays. On the way in, I drove past the new bridge 2 concessions over. The plow had kept it crisp. A coyote trotted along the rail and didn't hurry when I passed. It had things to do that weren't mine. Back at the detachment, the electric heat made that faint, sticky tick as it cycled. I wrote it up as clean as I could. Responded to telematics crash notification at former bridge site. On arrival, no vehicle, no disturbance to snow, no person seen. Area searched both sides of road and creek bed. Device audio on patched call contained periodic indicator tick and occasional seatbelt chime. No voice heard. Telematics provider reports device from 2004 model year. Subscription canceled 2013. Device type unlikely to operate on current network. Event ended at 255 hours. Fire and EMS stood by, cleared without action. The telematics company sent a follow-up email to our PSAP that our dispatcher forwarded to me later that morning. It was precise and a little apologetic. We can confirm an event of unknown origin was generated by legacy hardware associated with VIN 3030. Our network received an airbag deployment flag and attempted an automated emergency call via voice channel. The call path appears to have used a carrier no longer in service in your region. Our engineers cannot reproduce. We will continue to monitor. A week later, PSAP put a note in our nightly brief. 2 more short events from the same device ID, each at exactly the top of the hour between 3 and 4 a.m., duration 10 seconds, no audio, no location fix beyond a broad area that could have been anywhere on that grid square. We didn't roll for those. There's a line between go and note it and wait. You feel bad crossing it, even when it's reasonable. I went back to the old bridge site in daylight on a day off because some calls plant something that makes you want to see them again on terms that aren't hard. Farmers drive by with a wave barely off the wheel wave. The barricade looks smaller in Sunday. The creek cut looks like what it is, a ditch with ice. The RM had a backhoe parked a quarter-mile down, orange in the white like an idea in a field of blank paper. I stood by the sawhorse and listened. All I heard was crows doing their commentary and the polite groan of a drift letting go of a fence post. Years ago, before I worked this area, there had been a nasty spring flood along that creek. A car went nose in at the very place the old bridge abutment used to stand. Water over the road where nobody expected it that time of year. 2 farmers dragged the driver out. He lived. The council staked that spot later with reflectors, and then eventually pulled the bridge and realigned the crossing. Nothing in that memory has anything to do with what happened the night the airbag called me. It's just what the ground remembers when you ask around. If you asked me to put a name to it, I'd use the word habit. Not a haunting. Not a mistake with teeth. A device that was once taught to call for help in certain conditions may have found a way to try, even after the part of the world that used to listen had moved on. Or something in the network shrugged and replayed a pattern it thought belonged to a person. Or the cold air and the prairie combined to let me hear a delay I'd never noticed before. All 3 can be true, in the same hour. We show up. That's our piece of the equation. The night gives us a sound that doesn't have a source our hands can touch. We sweep the ditches anyway. We mark our glow sticks for whoever comes through after us. We tell the dispatcher the scene is clear. And a week later at 3 in the morning, when the radio breathes in before it speaks, you feel your ribs gather like they do when you expect something and aren't sure whether you want it to be ordinary or not. If this sounds too tidy, it's because I've had time to iron it flat in my mind. At the time, I felt the tiny pull on the skin of the world that told me 2 clocks were running slightly out of sync. It didn't make me afraid. It just put me in the place the job puts you. Present, patient, ready to accept that not every 911 is a person with a hand on the phone. Sometimes it's a habit calling through a line that forgot it had been cut.